Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. It's Taylor here, and we are going to take a look at the Radial Arm Saw today. Now, before we get into the different parts and the features of this machine, I want to take a minute and just talk about what its purpose is in our shop. So you can see that the saw is mounted on this arm, and it draws forward in a straight line. That straight line is set 90 degrees relative to this fence right here. And that gives us what is known as a crosscut, where we're cutting across the grain of a workpiece. In the case of the radial arm saw, and in talking about crosscuts, that is typically as close to 90 degrees from the edge of your workpiece as possible. So we call it a crosscut, cutting across the grain. And that is the only job that this machine has in our shop. It's capable of making an assortment of other cuts, but in our shop, we only use it for making crosscuts. So that's what we're going to use it for. Now, as we're looking at it, it's got a number of adjustment handles on the front top here, the top back. There's an adjustment underneath the carriage here, and we're not going to use any of those adjustments on this machine. I work hard to keep this machine set at a perfect 90-degree angle relative to the fence, and adjusting any of these other handles on here will jeopardize that and throw the machine out of balance, out of alignment, and then your workpieces will not turn out the way that they are supposed to. So I'm going to ask that you not touch or use any of the adjusting handles on this machine. So looking at it from the left side, we've got the handle, the main handle right underneath here where we are going to grab onto the saw, and this is going to allow us to draw the saw out and return it back on the carriage to make our cross cuts on our workpieces. When we look at the radial arm saw, and even though the dust collector is off, I'm going to unplug before I put my fingers down by the blade, just to be extra sure it's not going to turn on. When we look down here at the radial arm saw blade, you can see on the front edge, the teeth are pointing down towards the table. Here in the center, they're pointing back towards the fence. And then on the back side of the blade, they're pointing up away from the table. And when this machine turns on, that's the direction that this blade is going to spin, with the teeth moving in that circular motion. Now, the important thing about the orientation of the teeth and the way that the blade cuts when we draw the saw out on the carriage is that as it is intersecting our material, and I'm going to put a scrap piece up here so you can see, if I were cutting on this material, as I'm drawing the saw out, the cut point is going to be on the leading edge of the blade right here. And so, at our cut point, the saw blade is always moving down towards the table. And that's important because what that does is it allows us to hold our workpiece firm against the table and back against the fence. And then as we make our cut, the saw is cutting against this tabletop. And that's going to give us control over our workpiece and over the machine. Sometimes you might be tempted to have the saw out like this and slide your material in behind and then make your cut so that you can look down and see a little bit better. We never want to do that, because if we were to do that, now the cut point would be back here on the back side of the saw where the blade is coming up from the table. And what would happen is as soon as this blade contacts the workpiece, because there's nothing holding it down, it would immediately grab that workpiece and throw it up into the air, creating a kickback situation, which can be very dangerous. So it's really important to understand that because of the rotation of the blade, when it's cutting as we're drawing the saw out, it's cutting down towards the tabletop. Now, we've looked at the blade and we've talked about the handle. Some other parts to this machine, we've got the table, this white surface here. It extends 8 feet to the left and 4 feet to the right to support long work pieces as we're breaking down material into our more manageable pieces. It also has an aluminum fence on either side, and this actually extends a little bit longer, about 9 feet to the left and about 5 feet to the right. And this gives us a square, stable surface to hold our work pieces against so that we can secure them as the saw is cutting through the material. Right here, we have our stop block. And what the stop block is used for is setting the length of the cut that you're going to make. When we get to looking at specific setups, we'll look at how to place this stop block and how to read it for an accurate and repeatable cut. But the stop block is a great tool to allow you to work quickly and efficiently at the radial arm saw. The next thing I want to show you about the radial arm saw station is that right down underneath the table here, we have a trash can. And this trash can is positioned right here to help keep this surface clean. Now, when you're working at the radial arm saw, sometimes your cutoff piece that you are not using for your project will be long enough that it's worth putting back into the material storage room or into one of our other material storage locations for our usable materials. However, sometimes you're just trimming a very small piece off the end, and what I've noticed is that a lot of students will just leave that little cutoff piece here on the table. And that's not okay. And so what we've done is we've got a trash can down here. So if your cutoff piece is not usable, it immediately, as soon as the saw stops running, it immediately gets placed into the trash can and does not get left here on the table. Similarly, if your workpiece is long enough that it's reusable, instead of leaving it here on the workstation, that workpiece needs to be stored back in the storage room appropriately so that people can find it when they need it. Finally, coming around to the right-hand side of the saw, we've got our power switch right here. And it's just a simple up and down toggle switch. Up is on, down is off. This is how you're going to control the machine. And when we get to the setup and operating videos, you will see this machine in action. And what you're going to see is that when this machine is turned off, the blade continues to run for a long time. It does not have a brake on it that slows the blade down. And so consequently, you will often find yourself having completed your cut here at the radial arm saw, needing to wait for that blade to come to a complete stop. So that is the radial arm saw. Those are all the key components of it. We will have other videos that look at the setup, the safety procedures, and the operating procedures for this machine.